My name is Matheo Galatis. In this video, I'm going to share some information with you about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and how it relates to money, the money system, and banking itself. We're going to dive into the history of money, have a look at where we came from and where we're going with money. This is going to be absolutely fascinating. I've got a background in accounting and finance, and for the last 12 years, I've been diving deep into the psychology of money, human behavior, and looking into how we're evolving as human beings and how to optimize our own potential. I'm the author of the Know Yourself system, but for this video, what I'd like to do is share with you specifically about where we're moving towards and why it is so important to understand what Bitcoin and cryptocurrency actually is. Now, the first thing I want to begin with is that Bitcoin and most cryptocurrencies, they're not made or intended, or they're not necessarily currencies. They're classified as assets. But I believe that at some point we're going to move towards one of these cryptocurrencies being an actual currency, or we might have a few of them being currencies that we use to exchange value. You can understand a little bit more as we dive into it. So let's have a look at where we came from with money. How did money originate? What is money specifically? Money is essentially a means of exchange in value. We began many years ago, thousands of years ago, where we've had a tribe of people. And inside that tribe, everybody contributed their little bit. Everybody did their share inside the tribe. But then we started to exchange and get involved with other tribes. And as we had different tribes connecting and collaborating, we needed to find a means of exchange between the tribes. So one of the ways to exchange value between the tribes that was discovered, it emerged organically, was to barter. This was one of the first means of exchange, to change. I have something of value, you have something of value, I want what you have, you want what I have, and we exchange the value. But I'm sure you can understand that when we expand a little further and the system of human beings becomes a little bit more complex, that barter isn't an efficient means of exchange anymore. For example, if I had sheep and I tended sheep, what could I use sheep for? Well, I would extract the milk from the sheep, I would shear the sheep and take the wool and make clothing out of the wool, and I would also use the meat of the sheep and use it for food. But let's say I got tired of eating sheep and I have too much wool and I've got all this excess milk and cheese from sheep. What do I do with it? Well, I can store it for later, but eventually I would want to find someone to build a house for me. I would want irrigation, I'd need some water supplies, I'd need to buy horses so I can carry things from here and there. So I'd need to go and get this stuff. So I go to my good friend and he's got horses and he's got building materials and all these kinds of things. But I need to get that stuff from him. That's his livelihood. He hasn't got food to eat. He can't eat his horses. So what necessarily do we do? Well, I say, let me give you a couple of sheep and you can build my house. Now, this is an exchange of service. And back then it worked because there weren't long distances to travel, communities were close together, and people were not as complex as we are today in many ways. So what happened was it was easy to trade and exchange. But as the distances grew longer, as the commodities became more complex and the things we wanted to do, and let's say the person that I'm exchanging with is going to build my house. He says, well, I don't need wool. I've already got that from the other guy. I don't eat lamb. I prefer to eat pork, or I'm a vegetarian. Then what are we going to do? I can't give him my sheep to eat. So we need to find a different means of exchange. So our cultures started to develop certain items that stored value, They started with shells, they used certain stones and certain metal objects. But afterwards, those became a little bit weird, because when you go to a different tribe and you say, well, I'm going to give you this horseshoe, and I'll give you 10 horseshoes and you give me some food. They're like, well, we don't deal with horseshoes. What is this? It doesn't mean anything to us. So as cultures came together, we needed to create a common currency in some way. So they started to mold coins together. And people used to carry around coins in bags, and they used to exchange coins. This was a way that was a common means of exchange, and coins were recognized as a means of exchange. But then what happened? When a person started to have too many coins, then it was too much to carry. They started to become heavy, and the likelihood of theft came along. So what do people do? Well, if coin was a heavy and dense means of exchange, and it didn't make sense as people started to amass greater amounts of coins and they wanted to buy big things. Say you want to buy a car, you'd have to ship coins to the other person and eventually get a car. So coins was no longer efficient. And people turned to a different way. So they came together at some point, and they discovered putting paper. And they put paper together, and they wrote down value on pieces of paper, and they started to store gold and coins and valuable commodities inside what is currently known as a bank. And they took pieces of paper as a promissory note to say that this guy owns this much coin, this much value, and it's validated in the bank. So then this piece of paper is a promise to pay the amount of coins or gold. So we turned to paper. It's a more efficient means of exchange. We've got a note, and that note can carry greater denomination of currency, of value. But then eventually paper became not efficient anymore. If you were going to buy a big thing like a building or a piece of land, it would be very difficult to carry a lot of paper, all this money, and take it to the person you're going to buy a house with in briefcases. Some people still do that these days. And give the briefcases over and say, well, here's your money, start counting. It became inefficient, especially now that life started to become more fast-paced. Transactions needed to happen quicker. As our Western world started to become more technologically advanced, we needed to find a more efficient means of exchange. We moved to plastic. Credit cards and all these other systems started to evolve and emerge, and paper started to move to the wayside. We started to move to electronic means of payment, which is more efficient than coins, more efficient than paper, more efficient than credit cards. Electronic means of exchange. You don't have to go anywhere, you just log on to your computer and you send the money, and a person receives it in 2 or 3 days. Now we're moving to an even more efficient means of exchange. And this is what cryptocurrencies and the blockchain is actually representing. So I'm not going to dive into the details of what the blockchain is, what cryptocurrency is. The purpose of this video is to give you an analogy, an explanation of where we've come from with money. Money has come from a less efficient and more dense and a heavy means of exchange, and we're moving to lighter means of exchange in value. We're coming back to a point where we're having a common store of value, where you can put your value inside, and we can have direct exchange, where it's not going to take a few days for you to get paid for the service that you offer, but it can take seconds. Things are moving at a lightning speed, and we're moving from slow, less efficient means of exchange in value to fast, more efficient means of exchange in value. And Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and the blockchain are the systems that are going to facilitate the next means of exchange in value. This is the future. Banks are denying it. People are not ready for the change. They're like, what is this? They don't trust the system, but it's coming. And all I'm saying is start to dive into the world and start to understand that this is where we're going. The more resistance there is around the future, the more difficult it's going to be. So more people are going to start to adopt these, and there's going to be many changes. We're going to learn to adapt. We're going to learn what works, what doesn't work. This is a brand new means of exchange. It's never been done before. So there's a lot of trial and error. There's a lot of things that we need to learn still about the system, but it is coming. More efficient ways to exchange value between each other is coming. And this blockchain and cryptocurrency creates a brilliant opportunity for exchanging value. The great thing about it is it's decentralized. No one controls it. And this is something that's going to give power and responsibility back in the individual's hands. Thank you so much for joining me in this video. If you liked the content, please like it and please share your opinion and your experience in the comments below. I look forward to hear from you. Thank you so much.